Good afternoon, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads, and living room televisions. My name's Martin O'Leary, and I'm the Pervasive Media Studio's creative technologist. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. Especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio. You get to see my lovely office for the first time. This may be the first time you're engaging with us. For all of you newcomers, here's a little bit about what we do. The Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, the University of the West of England, and the University of Bristol. We're a home for early ideas, for companies, and a meeting place of both the creative and commercial industries. We're a studio space, offering desk space, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities, all for free for our residents. And most of all, we're a safe space for artists to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. This week's talk is by immersive artist and the former creative director of MIT's Center for Advanced Virtuality, Francesca Panetta. She'll be talking about deepfake technology, the malleability of history, and the speech that Richard Nixon had prepared in the event that Apollo 11 went horribly wrong. There's going to be a Q&A at the end, with the talk running out round about 40 minutes. If you've got any questions, just pop them into that chat window right there. I'll pick them out to ask Francesca, or if you like, you can tweet your questions to @PMStudioUK. There'll be a captioned version of this talk available here after the talk is finished. Now, before we start, next week's talk is by John Troyer, the director of the Center for Death and Society at the University of Bath. He'll be talking about how we negotiate the politics of memorialization and about how the dead body can function as a technology of memory. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PMStudioUK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Please don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get and the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. And please do feel free to share this link now on any of your socials. We are live now. This is where the recording is going to be. Thank you. So for now, I think I'm going to hand over to Francesca.
Hello everyone, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of the Pervasive Media Studio and the work that they do here, so I'm really happy to be talking for you all today. And yeah, I'm going to discuss the kind of project that I made when I was at MIT's Center for Advanced Virtuality, along with director Halsey Burgund, and huge help from a load of people to make this happen. Zilla, IDFA.lab, MIT Documentary Lab. You can see all the people on the slide, if that's come up yet. I'm not sure if it has, great. So yeah, huge amounts of help to make this project happen, but it sat within MIT, a production there. And this is Halsey and myself at MoMA, just before the pandemic. Yes, before the big event, and you can see us laughing away. We just had this piece screened at MoMA as part of the documentary week there. So I thought I'd just start by talking about the inspiration and then play you the film. The piece is a reimagining of history of the moon landing, and it takes a real piece of documentary evidence. So this is a speech that was written for Richard Nixon in case the moon landing hadn't gone successfully. It was actually a very risky mission, and Michael Collins, the third astronaut on the mission, said that actually they only gave it like a kind of 50% chance that they would make it onto the moon and back again successfully. So there were huge risks, and the speech was written for Nixon to broadcast on television in case the astronauts weren't able to come back from the moon. So it's really written as if the astronauts are stranded there on the moon's surface, which was certainly one of the risks. Luckily, Nixon didn't have to give this speech, and it sat in an archive for a very long time. And when we were thinking about this project, we thought, wow, this really could have been something that was broadcast on TV. let's use this to imagine another way the 1969 moon landing could have gone, but also try and show what deepfake technologies can look like. And I'll talk a little bit more about those objectives and how we kind of went about the project. But I thought I would show it to you all in case you haven't seen it, so that, yeah, while I'm describing how we made the project in more detail, it makes sense. So, Martin, would you mind running the film, and then we can discuss it more afterwards.
Houston, slightly less than 1 minute to ignition, and everything is go. What's that? 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Armstrong and Aldrin are scheduled to set foot on the moon.
That's felt like a pitch change rather than an acceleration increase. 1 minute.
This is CBS News color coverage of Man on the Moon. Sponsored by Kellogg's. Kellogg's puts more in your morning. Here from CBS News Apollo headquarters at Kennedy Space Center, correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good morning. It's T-minus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 53 seconds and counting in just an hour and a half. If all goes well, Apollo 11 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins are to lift off from pad 39A out there on the voyage man always has dreamed about. Next stop for them, the moon. So it is now that there is time, if only briefly in this busy morning, to think of those three men and the burdens and the hopes that they carry on behalf of all mankind. Here's Jack King in Launch Control.
We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy, it looks good, Wally.
Clear.
Somebody must be leaving the ground.
Building shaking. We're getting that buffeting we've become used to. What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
Hello, Houston. This is Apollo 11. I'm reading you loud and clear. Go ahead, over. Listen, Dave, everything's going just swimmingly. We see out our side windows the sun going by, and of course, out one of our windows right now, we've got the Earth. Roger. Time to begin maneuver is 3:05:03. We approach the moon will gradually grow larger and larger in size. 4 forward, drift into the right a little.
Okay, how are you looking? All your systems go?
It's 12:02. Stop alarm. Say again. Stop alarm. 12:01. 12:01. Roger, 12:01.
12:02. Low level.
Now, well may be the problem here, and we can monitor Delta 8.
What do you think, Don?
That's terrible. Let me try auto again now, see what happens. 1 minute. 1 minute. Roger, we got you.
We'll be good.
Roger, you've lost misfit.
Lost data flight.
We've had shutdown.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. These two men are laying down their lives in mankind's most noble goal, to search for truth and understanding. They will be mourned by their families and friends. They will be mourned by their nation. They will be mourned by the people of the world. They will be mourned by a Mother Earth that dared send two of her sons into the unknown. In their exploration, they stirred the people of the world to feel as one. In their sacrifice, they bind more tightly the brotherhood of man. In ancient days, men looked at stars and saw their heroes in the constellations. In modern times, we do much the same, but our heroes are epic men of flesh and blood. Others will follow and surely find their way home. Man's search will not be denied. But these men were the first, and they will remain the foremost in our hearts. For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
Roger. Looks good. Ready to copy.
Great. So thanks for watching the film, and I'm now going to talk a little bit about why we made it and how we made it. So deepfakes, I mean, it should be pretty obvious what deepfakes are, having watched the film, if you didn't know already, but essentially they are videos that have been manipulated to make people say things or do things that they never did before using artificial intelligence. And the latest statistics that we have in terms of how many deepfakes are out there was done by a company called Deeptrace, who did a report last June. At that time, there were 49,000 deepfakes out on the internet. The majority of these are non-consensual porn, so face swapping, usually innocent women's faces onto videos of porn stars. And obviously there's a huge risk for the innocent individuals who've had this done to them, but there are other risks as well with deepfakes. There are security risks. There was a British company that was conned into transferring a whole load of money to a fraudulent company that had deepfaked the voice of the CEO. There's a democratic risk. And we've heard quite a lot of this about on the news around kind of deep faking politicians to do things to discredit them, to make them again say things that they haven't done. But probably the biggest threat is around trust. So it's not necessarily the deep fakes and the videos themselves that are the biggest problem. It's actually that you erode trust in society, that anything that you see, you can't be sure if it's real. So it's this thing that has been coined the lies dividend, this idea that you can turn to any piece of media and say, well, prove it, it might be a deep fake. You know, we've certainly seen some media being discredited in the last few years, which wasn't a deep fake, but just their very existence means that you can question their veracity. So there's obviously a huge problem around the place of deepfakes in the ecosystem of misinformation. And, you know, I talked to a lot of academics and experts around how deepfakes can be combated through various means. And there are a number of different strands that have been identified. It's kind of verification methods. So we know whether videos or audio can be tagged with metadata that really proves the source of where it's come from. Very clear labeling. So this is certainly something that on the platforms they are being advised to do, be very, very clear where media is coming from, the source of it. Then there is technical detection. So there are a number of computer scientists who are working on having computer software that can identify whether something has been algorithmically manipulated. So using AI to shoot down AI. And you know, the problem about that is it ends up as a kind of cat and mouse game, where as soon as you've figured out one kind of solution for detecting AI, a kind of more sophisticated deepfake will come, and then you have to kind of catch that. So it's this kind of chasing of the cat and mice that the computer scientists that we talked to discuss. It's not just like finding the silver bullet. So there is regulation. So should platforms and distributors be allowing this kind of manipulated media to be on their platforms? If so, what types do you allow on, which types don't you? And also the kind of legal possibilities of outlawing different types of manipulation of media. And the film that we made in Event and Mood and Disaster comes into one of the last possibility of solutions here, which is one around awareness and media literacy. And it's pretty much accepted that all of the methods that I just identified, you know, verification, labeling, legislation, all of those are fine, but they don't really solve the problem on their own. You know, there's like none of them are really going to kind of erase deepfakes from our landscape. And so if that is the case, an awareness that they are there and what to be looking for and how to verify the kind of media that comes through our streams is extremely important. And so this is where our project fits in a kind of trying to show an awareness of the quality and the level of deepfakes that is possible out there and how easy it is to be deceived. So there we go, show how realistic they are, make our audiences more discerning, and show also how synthetic media can be used in creative ways. I'm going to talk a little bit about exactly how we made this. Both Halsey and I, the two directors of this film, we are not deep learning experts, so we needed to collaborate with people who really are and who are brilliant at this. And we also wanted to make both a synthetic voice and manipulate the visuals as well. We probably would have made life much easier for ourselves if we had just picked off one and changed the face and used an impersonator to do the voice, but we decided we were going to do a double deepfake, a complete deepfake here. So you can see the top strand was us making a voice model of Nixon, and the bottom strand is the facial manipulation, the video AI model. So I'm going to talk through those two streams now. So for the visuals, we worked with a company called Canny AI, who are based out in Israel, and they do something called video dialogue replacement. And the first thing that they did, and this they did before we even started to talk with them about this project is build a model that recognizes facial features. So by feeding the deep learning model with enough faces, it begins to learn what eyes are, what noses are, like what are the defining elements of faces. Then what we needed to do when we started to work with them was identify a source video that would be manipulated. And we went through a whole load of different Nixon speeches to try and figure out which one had the right setup, where Nixon's body movements were in keeping with what we wanted, because only the area around the mouth, the kind of jaw area and the area around the mouth would change. So the hands, the papers, all of that would stay the same. If he looked animated, that was still the same. So we landed on the resignation speech of Nixon, where he looked pretty somber, he looked quite emotional. We used that as our source video. Then what we did is we got an actor into the studio and we got him to read the contingency speech. So this is Lewis D. Wheeler, who is the actor that we found to work with on this project. And this is him reading the beginning of the contingency speech.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace.
So we sent this over to Canny, and along with the Nixon resignation video, and then this is what they sent back to us a few days later.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace.
So yeah, pretty canny. It's strange seeing Nixon's face and body reading this speech with Lewis's voice. So
fate has ordained.
I'm going to pay for that one for the moment. So then the next thing to do was create the voice, which was a lot more complicated. We worked with a Ukrainian company called Respeecher to do this. And the first thing we needed to do was create the voice model. So Canny had already done this before, but for the voice, this component hadn't been made. So this involved us sitting in a studio with Lewis again and getting him to repeat a whole load of Nixon fragments, audio fragments. What we would do is play Lewis a clip, and then Lewis would read that out. And the idea for this was you want two parallel sets of data. You want several hours of Nixon's voice, and you want several hours of Lewis's voice. And what it can do is compare them, and then it learns that what Lewis says can come out in Nixon's voice. So again, we took hours and hours of Nixon's speeches and we cut them into between 1 and 3 second clips. We had an interface where we played it, got Lewis to repeat it, recorded that, and then sent it off into the system. And we did this about 1,000 times.
And do what I believe is right.
And do what I believe is right. Is right? And do what I believe is right.
And do what I believe is right.
What's right?
Was?
I think. I don't know.
And do what I believe is right.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And do what I believe is right.
And do what I believe was right.
So that is just one clip. And we had to do this, as I say, hundreds and hundreds of times so that the deep learning model could learn Lewis's voice and then translate it into Nixon's. So here we are, here they are together.
For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
So there was quite a lot of kind of faffing around trying to match all this up together. Respeecher gave us a WAV file, and Canny had given us this video file, and got into Premiere and into Ableton and stretched and matched up and lip synced. And so there was quite a lot of kind of human kind of finessing to make it all look and sound seamless. But we were pretty impressed with the results. And then the job was to try and put it into a kind of frame it, because although this is, technically a kind of fantastic exercise, and we were very pleased with the work that both Kenny and Newspeaker have done, how could we make our audiences feel the importance of this speech and the significance if it had been read. So what we did was decide to put this, within a context and a narrative. We're both storytellers and very used to, how you frame a story to make someone care. And we used pretty traditional filmmaking devices, as you just saw. We set up the context, the stakes, the excitement of the crowds, taking the astronauts up into the sky, that journey, and then we manipulated the crash of the Eagle down to onto the moon. So that was really important for us, that it wasn't just a technical exercise and that we did give it this framing. And we also thought it was very interesting actually in terms of the bigger message around misinformation, because deepfakes certainly are a problem, but actually manipulation of media happens in all kinds of different ways. And some of the most problematic misinformation at the moment is done in a very analog way. This is a chart that came from the Data and Society Foundation, and they have this spectrum from cheap fakes to deep fakes. And so cheap fakes being, recontextualizing, speeding things up and slowing them down, kind of editing things out of context. And again, you can see in the crash sequence of the Eagle, that's exactly what we did. We reversed the footage, we intercut it, we used, we went through all the audio to find the most dramatic bits from the control room. So everything that's in the film is archived material, but by editing it, we managed to, create a reality that didn't happen. And that felt like an equally important message in terms of the kind of dangers of manipulation of media as the algorithmic ones of deep fakes are. We made a film with Scientific American around deep fakes and around this project. And this is Sam Gregory from Witness, who taught about the importance of this contextualization.
People believe things because of contextual clues. They rely on the fact you've got all the peripheral cues of reality, right? You have the CBS News, you have the anchor beforehand, and those make a huge difference because we rely on those cues to tell us if something's real.
So yeah, the fact that we use Walter Cronkite and the CBS News gives it a kind of authority that we wanted. So those are exactly the kind of cues that we were trying to give and show how easy it is to manipulate. We originally thought about this project within the context of an immersive exhibition. Early on, we were talking to IDFA Doc Lab about this project, and we told them how we had been very inspired by pictures of watch parties that we had seen. So in the 1960s, for these kind of big events, people would gather together in houses and watch them all together on the television. And we thought, oh, it'd be great to recreate this sense of this huge event and to invite people to sit in a kind of period environment. We really liked the idea of it, of trying to build the excitement, not only through the way that we edited the film, but also in the physical environment too. This is a version of the physical installation that we worked with Refresh, a festival in Zurich. And you can see really we're trying to place not only the film in the context of, within the archive and the anchor, but also within the physical context as well. This is in Amsterdam at IDFA. And you can see people kind of crowding around and gathering to watch it. And it made it, it makes this a really fun piece as well, and very accessible, as well as kind of terrifying as well, in terms of the possibilities of deep fakes. And for IDFA, we also produced this newspaper that audiences could take away with them. And we wanted to really inform our audiences of why we had made this film, what we were trying to do with it, and also some information about the technology behind it, how deepfakes work. So we wrote a number of articles and worked with academics and experts to give a paper that people could take away with them. So there was a memento, but also that we could really have this, a very kind of visceral, immersive experience that you saw in the museum, and then you could really digest what that meant afterwards. And then in July of last year, we launched a website, and we were very keen to get this project out to as many people as possible. So we created an immersive website that had this film, but it also had a load of contextual material as well. At the end of the film, we asked people a number of questions. Could you tell the text of the speech was real? Could you tell that the face was manipulated? And actually, you can see some of the results here. Half the people thought that 52% were correct. These are statistics for the percentage of people who got the answers right. So 52 people realized it was a deepfake. Visuals, 58 people thought that the text of the speech was real. So that means that quite a lot of people thought that we had made up the speech as well. So 59% of the people thought that Nixon's voice was real. So it's interesting. It gave us an insight into which parts of this film people thought were real or not. And the website that we made had a whole load of resources then that people could go through. We made an interactive dissecting the process, a lot of which I've just explained to you, but also articles about how synthetic media can be positive use for good, how different ways of combating deep fakes. We had the documentary from Scientific American on there as well. So we really wanted this to be a hub where people could dig in and learn more once they'd had this quite strong experience of watching this film. So yeah, that's the end of the talk that I'm going to do, and I can take questions for you all. And Martin, we're going to have a chat as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Fran. That was really good. We've got questions starting to come in already, so good. But yeah, if you do want to get a question in, just type it in that box over there. We've got a good while to get through them all. So I'm going to kick it off with this one from Dominic Lees, which I actually really like. Hi, Fran. I find the most affecting quality of your film is the performance of Richard Nixon. Could you have made a deepfake with similar emotive force without that resignation speech source video? I just love the idea that Richard Nixon is one of your performers. But
yeah, I like that. I really like the framing of that. Nixon is one of our performers. Yeah, it took us quite a long time to find that right. The kind of the source video that we thought would work, and we did actually try it with a different one. I mean, it was still effective, but it wasn't as effective. You can really tell it, in the eyes and the kind of body language, and that we weren't changing at all. I think also the words, lots of people have been really, really moved by the kind of poetry of the speech, and that's got nothing to do with us. That was, the wonderful wordsmithing of Bill Sapphire. He was a columnist also for the New York Times, as well as becoming a speechwriter for Richard Nixon. And so I think that we were really helped by a number of events to make it effective. But certainly we were really pleased that we could use that video. At the beginning, actually, Omar from Canny AI said we couldn't use it because there was zooming in, and he said it's too hard to do the dialogue replacement when the face is changing, changing in size and in shape, and when there's movement. He said, we need a locked off video. And we really loved the resignation speech. It starts with this big wide frame, and, the flags along the side, and then it kind of comes in. And Omar said, well, you know, you can do that in post-production, you know, you can zoom in. But even when we try to do that, you know, there's nothing like the original, you know, that original zoom, that somehow us trying to artificially kind of just zoom in using Premiere just didn't have the same effect as, you know, I guess it would have been on those old, you know, original rolly cameras. And then at the last minute, when we thought we'd got all of this kind of wrapped up, Omar said, you know what, our technology's improved and I think we can do this, and sent it back. And we were like, oh my God, we were so happy. Not only because it was that, you know, emotive performance of Nixon, but also because the movement and the framing worked so well for this film. So we were really, really, really pleased with that. But it's, you know, it's interesting working within these limitations. And also it's really interesting how quickly the technology develops, that just within the 3 months that we were working with Canny AI, they'd gone from it having to be static shot to being able to have movement. You think, wow, this is, you know, you guys are really developing, you know, this technology so fast.
Great. I guess that leads in very nicely to our next question from Mandy Rose. I wonder where this work has taken you, Fran, creatively speaking. Are you interested in working further on deepfakes? Are you developing other work? What might that be? What have you got in the oven?
I mean, I don't think I'm interested in doing a whole series of manipulated deepfakes for the sake of it. But I think what it's showed me is the potential of AI creatively and synthetic media. And I think the possibilities of using AI within arts and documentary is only just beginning to be explored. And that really, really excites me. And actually, I kind of prefer to use the word synthetic media than deep fake, because really it's only a deep fake if it's a kind of ethically problematic. But there's lots of use of synthetic media, which is, you know, consensual, that's very, you know, not problematic ethically at all. You can deep fake, you know, tulips, or, you know, all kinds of video. Like, it doesn't have to be problematic. So I think that we need to also, as filmmakers, documentary makers, artists, think more around AI and media, synthetic media. And what does that mean in terms of being able to create synthetic voices, create avatars? I've been thinking a lot about historical documentaries, and how a lot of the archive material we have is very limited by what was shot and who decided what was important to shoot. And as we've been talking about kind of reckoning with history and thinking about the narratives that haven't been told in the past, I've been thinking, oh, it would be really interesting for synthetic media to bring to life some of the characters who weren't deemed important enough to interview, to make films about, because they were a minority, they politically weren't seen as important, and be able to make films about these people, be able to bring that into education, into history. Like, that feels really exciting to me, and feels like it could be a redressing of who is on screen, and, you know, who we deem to important enough to make these documentaries of. And then there's like very, very useful cases for synthetic media as well. So one of the synthetic voice companies that we were talking to is making it possible for people who are either losing their voice or lost their voice to be able to capture it, so that they'll be able to talk after they lose their voice, or be donated a voice by someone else so they can speak. So kind of therapeutic uses, and then also great uses in documentaries. So there's a fantastic film made by David French called Welcome to Chechnya, which used deepfakes to be able to obscure the identity of the kind of vulnerable contributors. And, you know, it's always very dissatisfying when we have to kind of blank out contributors, or pixelate them so you can't tell who they are. It dehumanizes them. So being able to actually have characters in docs or in films that feel human and are, rather than having to use these kind of post-production techniques is a great use as well of synthetic media. So yeah, I'm excited to explore AI more. I don't know whether that will be a series of reinterpreting histories or deep fakes, but there's like a huge amount of interesting things that can be done in this area.
So touching on something you said just there, like I was struck when you showed that sort of deep fakes to cheap fakes sort of continuum. Like a lot of the stuff, especially on the cheap fake side, are techniques which I would just describe as filmmaking. You're recontextualizing archive footage. You're using lookalikes, or actors as they're more usually called. And this, what would you say this brings as in terms of possibilities that can't be achieved with those more traditional techniques, which often, I mean, it seemed like this was a lot of very labor-intensive process. You could have just hired a Nixon impersonator.
Could have done, it's true. Well, I guess this technology will get cheaper and easier. And so in the end, it'll be, you won't have to have an impersonator. And, that's, I guess, why it's scary, is where this develops. It took us 3 months with 2 of the best production companies to make this film, but that will not be the case in the future. And so at the moment, it is fairly expensive to hire a Nixon impersonator. And to be honest, I really don't think that I could have found someone who looked and sounded quite as good as that. I mean, that I think is really the scary thing, is that I think that film is pretty believable. And I don't know whether filming something anew, you can tell it's the real archive. You can tell it's the Oval Office. I couldn't have gotten to the Oval Office. I don't think I would have found anyone who looked or sounded as realistic as that. So, I think it's the closeness to what we see as reality is scary. And you're right that manipulating media is totally possible. And for sure, the experts that we talk to, they're like, well, that is the real danger at the moment is really lo-fi. It's, it's text, to be honest. You think of coronavirus and all of the misinformation that went around on WhatsApp. Like, that's lo-fi. You think about some of the manipulated videos of politicians. It's re-editing the words so that it makes people say things just literally by taking the audio and putting a bit of B-roll over it. It's so easy to make people say anything in audio. It's saying something, a bit of footage is from one place when it's from another place. Slowing down, Nancy Pelosi, slowing her down so she looks drunk. That's like, anyone can do that on GarageBand or on Premiere or Final Cut. It's like very easy. So I think that one of the messages I'm really keen to kind of make clear is that it's not deepfakes that are the only problem. Like, manipulation of media is much easier at the moment, done in a kind of analog way. There's just no doubt about it. What this is another weapon. It's another tool in the pocket of people who do want to deceive you and who do manipulation for kind of nefarious purposes rather than for positive, creative ones. But these are all tools. You're right. They're tools that as filmmakers we use. This is, it is another technique of editing and creation. And that, I guess, is again why I like to call it synthetic media, because used within that context, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's a fantastically exciting area. It's around consent and intention for me. So yeah, I think it's the whole package is what is important to keep in mind.
I've got another question here from Dominic Lees. How concerned are you, from the perspective of a creative practitioner, about the debates in law that seek to restrict synthetic media?
For me, it's less around the form as it is the use of it. And I guess I just said that, but it's like, you know, why you wouldn't decide to outlaw videos or WhatsApp messages. So I think the challenge around the legality is, what is it that's being made illegal? Because certainly media that causes harm, I do want it to be made illegal, but it's probably not the technique that is what should be made illegal. Because as I just said, you know, the majority of misinformation is not synthetic. So we saw in the States a couple of the states banning deepfakes, especially before elections for a certain amount of time. I don't think there's a problem with that, because it's such an early stage that that's probably a relatively easy, quick fix at the moment while we're trying to figure out, like, what is the strategy. But as I say, that most of the harm around misinformation isn't being done that way. So it seems like a little bit of a red herring. What are the most effective ways of identifying harmful misinformation? And not only identifying it, it is also, what can we do to be able to combat the results of that? So, for instance, a CNN reporter went and showed a whole load of deepfakes to supporters at a Trump rally, and showed how easy it was to manipulate Joe Biden. And their response was, okay, well, it might be manipulated, but like, that's our truth. That speaks to our truth, and we don't see this as a problem. And so often I go back to not just being able to identify it, although that is certainly one strand, but also what are the causes for this kind of misinformation and kind of divisiveness around media. So why is there such a plethora of misinformation, and why don't people care that they're being manipulated? When I spoke to Daniel Citron, the law professor at Boston University, she said, really, it's the humans that are the problem. The humans are the bug in the code, she said, not the AI. We're the ones who are both using it to deceive, but we're also the ones who maybe don't care, particularly if we're deceived, as long as it fits in with the message that we want to hear. So what does that mean in terms of how we develop an understanding around what is truth, what our relationship is with messages that we might not want to hear, what we accept as truthful? I think there's a huge amount of work to be done, around that area. And that comes into the kind of question of polarization and filter bubbles. Kind of, how do we try and bridge societies, make people more willing to see media that they might not want to see, have less of a need to misinform for these purposes. So I think it's a kind of human solution as well as a technical one.
Yeah, I guess there's always the issue, the worry that people are going to jump on, ban the thing that they don't really understand, which is the classic history of tech regulation, where you can't expect the people making the laws to fully understand what it is that they're banning.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have time for one or two more questions if anyone wants to get in. I wanted to ask something, though. You talked a lot about the power of framing and about the CBS News and Walter Cronkite and so on. But I was wondering how you felt about the framing of this as a deepfake piece, and how much power you think that has, and whether you think that'll go away as these things become more normalized. Like, is this technology only interesting now because this is a strange new thing, or is it going to continue to be interesting in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked a lot about the framing of this project early on. Like, would we even call it a deepfake? Was it a deepfake? And were we comfortable with that language? What kind of service was this? And, you know, I think that we see this in all of these emerging medias, that, you know, you can handle one term and then it becomes something else. It's not quite, you know, transmedia does that. Oh, is it mixed media? Is it XR? Is it VR? Or extended media? Like, it feels a bit like that kind of grappling that we always have when we're looking at new different forms. I mean, I think that deepfakes is particularly problematic because it has this kind of value judgment baked into it, and yet it is being used for other purposes as well. And so there is definitely some kind of linguistics that need to be evolved around, like, what exactly, like, what is a problematic deepfake? Do we only use that in certain circumstances? When can deepfakes be used usefully? Like, there's been a fantastic series that was done at MIT's Open Documentary Lab with Witness, which really investigated all different types of synthetic media. And, you know, are deepfakes okay if they're used for comedy? Are they, you know, is it okay if they're used for advocacy? I don't think there's a rule book for this yet. You know, it's very early tech and people are trying to figure out, like, is this okay? Is this not okay? You know, we were very clear right from the start that although this was a kind of creative film, that it wasn't, it had educational purposes to it, to inform people of, you know, how realistic deepfakes could be. So we were very aware around the wording that we use to frame it, the setups, like when it's in physical installation form, the website. And we did quite a lot of user testing. So especially at IDFA, we found that even though we'd smothered the place with kind of deepfake posters around it, still that message wasn't, you know, it didn't reach 100% of the people. And so then you think, oh gosh, okay, well, what have I contributed now? If someone's walked away thinking, I heard someone saying, oh, I didn't realize Nixon pre-recorded that speech in case. And I was like, oh gosh, I better go and tell them that's not the case. But you can't be there to do that with everyone who's on the internet. So we definitely approached it with caution and thought very carefully about the language that we were using. But yeah, I think that to your point around, is it almost that this is, people are so nervous about this because it's a new technology, it's kind of being hyped, and, you know, is it really as dangerous? I mean, certainly the misinformation scholars that I talk to are like, there's a lot of hype around this, you know, democracy is going to die because of deepfakes, the end of reality because of deepfakes. It's like, well, no, this is just the latest installment of misinformation. And they're very keen to not scaremonger, because, as I said earlier, you know, there is this problem around creating a zero trust society, that if you scare people so much that everything they possibly see could be a deep fake, you're actually doing probably more harm than good. That's really hard to get the balance right. It's like, okay, well, what does that look like at the moment? We're just kind of warning, but not scaring, informing, but also, you know, trying to use the techniques as artists to kind of engage in a very strong way. So, you know, I'm glad that we had a long time to really test and think about this, because it felt tricky. But we did do a lot of testing, and we were lucky to be able to talk to people who saw it, and then do a lot of web testing as well. And we haven't had any complaints so far. You know, we put it on YouTube. By like 1 million people on YouTube thought, oh my God, are we also adding to moon conspiracy theories? Like, it's just like, you know, not only are we like putting a deep fake on the internet, we're also adding to moon conspiracy theories. And all of the comments from the kind of conspiracy theorists on YouTube were like, they never made it to the moon. This isn't true. They never made it to the moon. And so it didn't help them. Basically, it hasn't helped the conspiracy theorists. So that felt that was reassuring. That was one of the things we were worried about. And people have been very responsive. The kind of organisations that are advocating around kind of how do we stop this kind of misinformation has seen this as a helpful project. So yeah, I mean, I think that we need different ways to communicate with people around these. Right back to one of my early slides, this is around how do we communicate what exists and how to verify our sources and what to do in ways that are interesting. And as kind of communicators, we want to find like ways that we can grab people and go like, look at this is important to pay attention to. So how can we do that in different ways? So I guess this is one attempt to do that.
Great. I think that's probably all we've got time for today. So thank you very much, Fran. That's been fantastic. And I look forward to seeing what comes of it in the future.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Great. Before you all go, please remember that next week's talk is by John Troyer, the director of the Centre for Death and Society at the University of Bath. He'll be talking about how we negotiate the politics of memorialization and about how the dead body can function as a technology of memory. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PM-Studio UK on Twitter, @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or on the newsletter on our website. Please don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Give me those numbers. I love those sweet, sweet numbers. Give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share this link. Captioned version of the video will be available to watch again shortly after we finish up. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you here again next week.